Alright, welcome back. So in this video, I want to now talk about another misconception about psychic abilities that I thought was interesting enough, or it is ubiquitous enough for it to be worth mentioning here. And that's this idea that psychic abilities are fun to use, right? So I didn't write anything on the board. Basically, I'm just going to explain everything off the top of my head. Should be a short video. It's not really too much to discuss. But yeah, this is something that a lot of people, this is an idea or an attitude that a lot of people have toward psychic abilities. And let me just say, to sort of splash some cold water on that, this is definitely not the case, right? Psychic abilities are absolutely not fun to use at all, right? So when I was first using psychic abilities, right, or before I really started using them, I had that kind of misconception too, or that attitude, right? I thought, we see psychic abilities used a lot in TV, right? So in stories and movies and things like that, where, a person will sort of use a psychic ability, they do something like this, right? And then they just know things instantaneously in its full nature, right? So if they want to solve a crime or something, I don't know, they would just use their psychic abilities to figure something out, or just do this and to read someone's mind, now they know what's going on, right? Or if they want to see like a hidden object or target, right? They use their psychic abilities and boom, they see the target and now the story can move forward, or just something like that. Could even be telekinesis, right? So they'll see an object and then it moves and things like that, right? So we think of psychic abilities as being very, very fun because of the stuff that we see on TV. However, right, it's using them in practice is nothing like that, right? So is our psychic abilities, would you use them still? Like when it comes to ESP, for example, can they still be used to see a hidden target? Yes, they can be, right? So in that sense, they're similar, but the experience of using them and the amount of information that you can gain in reality is nothing like that. It's not that quick and instantaneous. It still requires a huge amount of work. So on top of psychic abilities being, like I said before, you shouldn't really use them unless God has called you to use them, right? If you don't have a relationship with God like that and you don't know how to speak to him yet, you haven't gone deeper into your relationship with him, you shouldn't be anywhere near psychic abilities. And even if you are, then you should ask him. Ask him what he wants you to use psychic abilities for, right? Don't just sort of make up your own reason and start using them, right? You absolutely need God's permission to do this. That's my belief. However, even when you do use them, well, I'm specifically talking about using them for a specific purpose. I don't know that God would ever ask you to use it for that purpose. But when I was using them, for to see hidden targets, right? So I would just have a target or plan to look up a target. It could be even an image online, right? I'll just click the image. I don't know what the image is going to be, but I'll click it and see if it matched up with what I psychically sensed from it, right? So it'll be things like that, right? And when I'm using my psychic abilities to see things like that, right, it is not the case that I do this for about 1 or 2 seconds and then I know the image perfectly. Like, no, it's nothing like that. So when you're using psychic abilities, first of all, like I said, your subconscious actually has to charge. That takes time. It can take a long time for you to see a single target, right? It's not like the way they test it in psychic experiments where they'll give someone maybe a couple minutes to figure out what the target is. That's just completely not how it works, right? Seeing a single target, depends on how much, well, this will make more sense in the next chapter, but depends on, let's put it this way, the longer you charge, the more your accuracy should have be increased, I should say, right? The higher the affinity, the higher the chance of your predictions being correct, the longer you charge, right? So, it'll make more sense in the next chapter. But generally, a single target, depending on how complex the information is, again, that's a component of it which we'll talk about. But I'd probably give it like a week, right? If you wanted to be decently safe with it, right? So it could take like a week. It doesn't take a couple of seconds or a minute, not even an hour, right? That's absurd. So on top of it taking a huge amount of time just to see a single simple target, right? It's also a lot of, how do I want to word it? It's a huge amount of meticulous sort of mental labor, right? It requires a huge amount of sort of pedantic sort of observation in terms of your own thoughts. I sometimes call it mental surgery because you have to be so precise and so specific in terms of your thoughts and your intentions. Now, to be fair, I practiced psychic abilities years ago, so this was before I had the theory that has developed as I have it now. So probably it wouldn't be as hard for me if I tried to use it now, but back then it was it was so difficult. Like that, it was difficult, but more specifically, what I'm trying to say is that it was so, exactly like I said, meticulous. It is extremely meticulous, right? Every little tiny detail matters, and you have to specifically produce your intentions in such a way where you have to make them very, very, very precise. Your mind can't just run all over the place, right? To be fair, now I could probably do it that way, but back then I didn't think that was okay. I didn't have the full theory. But still, I still believe that even now, there would still be some degree of mental surgery to it, right? So it requires very specific and very precise sort of efforts in terms of controlling your intentions to get this right. And again, that'll make more sense in the next chapter, right? So they're definitely not fun, right? It's not fun to use. When you see a target, right, you don't just see everything about the target. That's how scientists like to test it, and that's the sort of random condition they always put on it because they're not actually practicing science, right? Psychic abilities, when you're using psychic abilities, you can retrieve information from the target, yes, but it's not all at once, right? Where if you use psychic ability at all, you just know everything about the target 100%, and you could sort of draw the target by hand if the target's a picture. You know everything about the target. You see it perfectly. You could draw it by hand just from the image in your mind. That's just that's just a nonsense sort of condition they place on it because, like I said, they're not actually practicing science. No, when you're using psychic abilities, you actually get information about the target little by little, and then you got to put it together, right? Again, we'll talk more about that next chapter. But it's a huge amount of work. It's a huge amount of mental effort. You have to do it for a very long time, right? And then the last thing, which it makes it even more than all of that, what makes it not fun to use, is that psychic abilities, at least when I practice them, they are antithetical to the fun frequency, right? More specifically, they're antithetical to spiritual energy. And fun is a positive emotion, so that is aligned with spiritual energy. And what I mean by that is when I used to charge psychic abilities, I could never charge psychic abilities in a way. Well, I'll talk more about it in the next video, actually. For now, and this is actually how I think I put in the book, when I used to charge psychic abilities a lot, right, my ability to charge positive emotions, really any positive emotion, right, so it's antithetical to spiritual energy, but I'll talk more about it in the next video. But more specifically, I could not charge the fun emotion, right? Fun requires its own intention. That intention quantizes your subconscious at the fun frequency or some positive emotion, right? And it has to charge at that frequency, which means you have to sort of tell some story in your mind to keep your subconscious instinct expressing itself at a particular frequency and in a particular way, right? The intention that results in you using psychic abilities is not the intention that results in your subconscious charging at the fun frequency, right? Of course. And so you're going to notice, at least this was for me, right? There is more nuance to this, to the theory that we'll probably get into in the next chapter, not really in this chapter. But suffice it to say, for now, we'll just say that when you're charging when you're charging your subconscious to use psychic abilities, right, your ability to feel fun drops, right? So as you're getting better at using psychic abilities, your subconscious ability to express the fun emotion is dropping, right? In fact, your ability to really express any positive emotion is dropping. So the more you using these psychic abilities specifically means you aren't able to feel the fun emotion by definition, right? Or really by the nature of the subconscious. So you're not going to be able to do both at the same time. They are antithetical to each other, right? So this was something that I had learned when I started using psychic abilities, right? They are absolutely not fun to use, right? There's a lot of work involved in it. It's basically just labor, right? Like I said in the book, right? I felt so much more fun when I stopped using them, right? So So especially a lot of young people, right? And this is also true for, I forgot to mention, a lot of young people getting into New Age and things like that. They fall victim and prey to this stuff, and they open themselves up to potential psychic possession because they think this. They think this from a lot of movies they see and a lot of TV shows, right? That psychic abilities are so fun and it's so cool to use them and it's so interesting to use telekinesis on stuff and this and that, right? Or use their psychic abilities to sort of get hidden knowledge about the world and like, no, right? On top of that stuff being wrong, right? So I don't believe God would ever call you to use your abilities in that way, right? You only use them to serve him, and to do that you need to have a relationship with him. Unless you were born to do it, right? If you're born to do it, usually, well, you still need to have a relationship with him then, but you usually know a lot sooner in life. But on top of it being wrong for that reason, which is really the only reason that's important, really, but just to get into these other reasons, these more secondary reasons, they're also not fun at all, right? At least that's been my experience, right? They are, like I said, they're a huge amount of meticulous work and labor, and it's basically just like going to work, right? Like you wouldn't, it's really not, you're kind of more happy to stop doing this than to do it, right? Which is why I don't look at, like, even though I know how to use psychic abilities, or I believe I know how to, I don't look at it fondly like, oh man, I wish I could use psychic abilities again. Because I can tell you, like, I did not have a great time when I was using psychic abilities. This was years ago, right? I felt super depressed, which we'll talk about more in the next chapter, but I felt super depressed. It was a huge amount of work. It required a huge amount of meticulous mental labor to keep my intention and observation of my own feelings. Like I said, I didn't have the theory set up back then, so it was a lot more work than probably it would be now. But yeah, it required a lot of strenuous mental effort, right? And I don't mean holding an intention super hard, right? We'll talk more about it later. But suffice it to say, it is a huge amount of work, and your subconscious can't even really charge the emotion of fun while you're doing this, right? So it is completely not fun at all, right? And so I just wanted to kind of splash cold water on that for people who sort of have that attitude about psychic abilities. They're not fun to use at all, right? At least for specifically, I'll just say one more sort of, not really a caveat, but one more thing I want to say about that is that I was using it specifically to sort of see targets that were hidden from me, right? So I wanted to see a picture that was hidden from me, then I would look at the picture to see if my guess was correct, right? Now, God would probably call you to use it for a different reason, right? So I don't imagine he would ever call you to use it for a reason like that. He would call you to use it to serve him, right? And a lot of times it's from the people who I've seen, who I do believe God has called to use these abilities. Usually they use it to either speak to angels, right? A lot of times they speak to angels that come to them and minister for God. Or they'll use it, like this happened with Dan and Brinkley, they will use it to kind of tell people things in a way that heals them, right? And kind of gives them a reason to believe. You know, it's usually something like that. But they're not using it to like look into the future, right? Or try to see something hidden so they can have some type of power over the world and like stuff like that, right? That's witchcraft and occultism. People who use these abilities on behalf of God are just using them for what God has told them to use it for, which is always going to be to help someone or help people. Right? It's not going to be for sort of parlor tricks like that. But I was using it in the parlor trick way, right? So that's probably why I felt so bad about it. But yeah, so basically I just want to put that out there. I don't know how it necessarily is using these abilities in the right way. So to be fair, I don't have that experience. I imagine if you're using these abilities in service of God, then it's generally going to feel good, right? It's always, anything you really do with God is always going to feel pure and righteous, right? So yeah, that's an important distinction to make, just to be clear. But yeah, so I think that's it for this video. In the next video, I now want to get more into this idea that the misconception that psychic abilities are safe, right? They are very dangerous to use. Which we kind of went over that already, but I'll just kind of say it again. It'll be more or less a recap video. But I did put it in the book in this section of the chapter, so I'll just go over it. But But yeah, that's it for now, though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.